Well, I've been looking forward to this interview for some time. I know we've had it scheduled for a little bit here. You seem to be a busy man, and I've I
Awful.
love your work. I love your book, especially. I mean, you have what, 8 books that I
Yeah,
saw?
and another one is coming out. In Each Other's Care is coming out next year. This year.
This year. Awesome.
Yeah, and a
Your brain
revised
on
Cry for Love. Yeah.
Yeah, Your Brain on Love was the one of the first books I read in terms of my own journey, learning about relationships and everything. And it is packed full of just not only understanding, but like practical tools and things to do that I've implemented in my relationship. And it's been an absolute game changer. And so I just want to say welcome to the show. I'm really
Thank
excited
you.
to have this conversation with you.
Me too. With you.
Um, yes. How did you get started into this work? Because I see like you are making moves, so to speak. You're really impacting a lot of couples, a lot of people. I'm always curious to know how that started for you.
It's weird. There's this thing, the fog of the present and the future. Only looking back do I have some perspective, but it's a strange journey. I went from being a musician, that was in my life, in the early part of my life, to becoming a therapist.
Mm.
And I went from all sorts of disciplines: group psychotherapy, systems, family systems, Gestalt training, inpatient work with John Bradshaw, drug and alcohol programs. And Then I started to be interested in prevention work with caregivers and infants.
Mm.
So immersed myself in neuroscience and arousal regulation, and also infant brain development. So uh, that didn't quite work out because it was very hard to get people to come in. It seems getting people to operate with prevention is a hard
Yeah.
get. Um, and so then I switched to couples, realizing that I could do prevention work by working
Mm.
with the hierarchical system, so to speak.
Mhm.
But also, I was going through a divorce at the time that I made the switch, and I wanted to know what happened. So I had a selfish interest in couples, and I found that everything I understood about attachment was applicable to the adult romantic primary attachment system.
Mm.
So all good, and I've never looked back.
Wow.
So
That's awesome. So it seems you're doing the prevention work that you were desiring to do before, just in a
yeah,
different way.
yeah, oh yeah. I was taken by a group up in Vancouver, the
Mhm.
Watch, Wait, and Wonder program at the Muirs. Ran that program, still exists up there. And I loved that program, that the idea that in a very short amount of time, we can alter the trajectory of the infant or the young child, their trajectory developmentally,
Mm.
even if we don't change the parents that much. Just takes a little tweaking, and
Hmm.
means perhaps the difference between a child with an eating disorder or personality disorder. And so I love that idea. uh, but as I said, in this country, we don't have a mandated program where parents have to come in with their children. We only have in hospitals something called the Well Baby Clinic, and family physicians or pediatricians spend some time with the parents and the infant, but
Hmm.
many aren't trained to look to see if there are problems in the attachment system that early.
Is that happening anywhere in the world?
Yeah, it happens in Canada. It happens in other
Mm.
countries
Wow.
where at-risk mothers are expected to go into these government-run programs,
Mhm.
and the statistics are incredible. I mean, um, just a short time in these programs, the
Mm.
we don't see the same problems in attachment disorganization as we do in mothers and fathers, parents, caregivers who don't have early intervention and are at risk.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's just hard to get people to do prevention with anything premarital, come and learn before getting into a blended family, the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
Or what happens, in the first year with an infant.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, yeah, humans are usually motivated by pain, or like when the thing is there, then they'll address it instead of preventing it.
Yeah.
What sparked your curiosity in the beginning with prevention work?
I think my work with disorders of the self, personality disorders, my then mentor, who's now passed away, James Masterson, saved my professional life, because I was working as an intern at the John Bradshaw Center. And that was a series of inpatient settings that were very, very intense. And we had a rather significant population of axis, then we called it axis 2 disorders. And I would go home some days, in tears, because of the slings and arrows of daily inpatient life, and working with these patient populations that were very, very challenging. And so I immersed myself in object relations. Actually, Masterson's was called self and object relations. And so I started specializing in that. And I thought, as I'm learning more and more about infant attachment through later mentor Alan Shore, I started thinking, it'd be kind of swell to just start in the beginning and see if we can prevent a lot of these disorders. It's a good idea, just hard to get an audience. So.
Right. Well, speaking of an audience, you definitely have people listening right now. So to the people that are tuning in, what would you say are some of the key points to either be aware of or address when it comes to prevention? Like, let's say that somebody's listening and they're like in the work, whether they're self-aware, they're looking to dive in deep and do the work on themselves, whether they're in a relationship now or not, and they do want to make sure it's set up for success.
So are we talking about infant prevention of infant pathology, or couples success?
Let's do both, but start with couples, because that comes first.
The reason I like working with couples, other than they're fun, and really, it's really a lot of fun, and because of the nature of that primary attachment relationship, if conceptualizing it structurally as a hierarchical system, where the parents are actually the big nervous systems, children are the little nervous systems, or the parents are the big bells, the kids are the little bells, and they're ringing constantly to the parents in ways that most parents don't know or understand. Parenting is theater. It's show, not tell, and kids are watching constantly as their brains are developing, trying to figure out things like gender identification and sexes, the sex and power between the sexes, how people get along, how people work things out, and how they interact under stress. And so all of this is influencing kids all along. And so working with that system with young children often changes the children almost immediately, the younger the child, because that upper system, that couple system, is so powerful in determining objects and people in its environment. And we're not just talking about kids, we're talking about neighbors and friends and so on, that's a very powerful system to work with, kind of thinking of it as the smallest unit of a society. Right? And so they operate under, whether they're aware of it or not, uh, um, social justice ideas of fairness and justice and sensitivity. And if they don't understand that, then they can also wreak havoc in the family system. So all good in working with the couple system, and as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And so what needs to be in place for the couples? If you don't mind going into that just a little bit more.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Because you, like I said, the books that I've read of yours, and can see you have different topics, but they're just full of so many like practical applications. I love it. But I'm curious about how your brain thinks of like the things that need to be in place, or in order for it to be successful.
So the approach that I use, that I developed, is a psychobiological approach, meaning it's a developmental approach that looks at the social emotional abilities of any human from infancy throughout the lifespan. So we're interested, obviously, in brain development, in autonomic nervous system development, and also what people can and cannot do in the social emotional realm. And so that's the science, that's the sort of the under the hood part of PACT, a psychobiological approach. On top is really a structural conceptualization of what all unions require in order to succeed, all alliances, teams, where people are interdependent, meaning the participants have the same things to gain and the same things to lose, which make them equal stakeholders. So in the adult world of unionizing, let's take the romantic relationship. In a free society, we're looking at two individuals, fully autonomous thinking individuals, who are taking their place as partners, two generals, two bosses, two executives, people who are leaders, and that they are co-constructing that thing we call a relationship, which is an abstraction, doesn't really exist in life except in our heads. So if you and I are going to create a union, we have to have a shared purpose for doing that. We also need a shared vision for where we're going and why. But then we also need principles of how we're going to govern each other and everyone else so that people are safe, so that we protect each other from each other, which is a necessary thing to do. And that happens in teams. It happens in cop car partners or the military or dance troops or anything where people have a common vision. We want to win. We want to survive. We want to make money. We want to create, whatever. Only in couples does that not exist. And it's astounding and troublesome. And it is a predictor for what is to come. If these two people aren't the co-architects of their relationship, then who is? And then who's running the show? That becomes a problem, because without coming up with our relationship ethics, our ethos, how we're going to stop each other from doing damage, how we're going to get each other to do things that we both believe are best for us. How are we going to do that when it's the hardest thing to do? And that's where the human condition issue comes in. Human beings are by nature unreliable. We are messy creatures that are warlike and aggressive, impulsive, moody, fickle, opportunistic, easily influenced by groups, and xenophobic. So that is what we're dealing with, whether we are in love or not. And people don't realize this, and they suffer the consequences eventually by not understanding the nature of being human, which is everything I just said.
Yeah.
It's not about love. It's not about emotion. It has to be about purpose and vision. Why are we doing this? What's the point of this? What are we getting that we couldn't get elsewhere? And why would this be the best deal? Because ultimately, these relationships must be based on terms and conditions, deal or no deal. People have to be honest about that. Otherwise, they'll say yes to something that is going to make both of them resentful. So that's the major issue. That's one of the major issues. There's two. First is organization and lack of thought and preparation and basically policy making. The second is really just as important, and that is the manner in which we all will interact when one or both of us is under stress or in distress. That's a big problem, because in teamwork, in a two-person psychological system, we're bound together by fate. Where you go, I go. Since we're interdependent, our fates are tied, and other things are tied too, like our nervous systems. So any illusion other than that is simply a fantasy. We will affect each other at every moment, like it or not. So we have to think in a way that is fair and just and sensitive to each other at all times. Very hard to do. We have to be fully collaborative and cooperative at all times. Really hard to do. I have to think of you at the same time I'm thinking of me, consider your interests and my interests simultaneously. Really hard to do. And yet anything else will begin to cause trouble, will begin to experience threat in the system. Threat is this pernicious survival issue that can be perceived through the tone of your voice, the raising of your brow, how you tilt your head, how you're moving, how you're not moving, the word choices that you make, and so on. All these little things are happening at lightning speeds, where we pick up threat cues and through a recognition system. And if we don't understand this survival issue, interpersonally, we'll accrue threat, and then good times be gone, and now we're in survival mode, and that's what we want to prevent. So all of these things are human. They're not about personality, culture, not about how you were raised. All human primates will do very similar things when they're under stress, and one thing they will do is revert to a one-person psychological system of I, me, and mine, and you. That's what we're up against.
Right.
And you can see this across history and happening now in small systems and large systems. This is just the way it is. So we have to be smarter than that.
Yeah. And I love painting the picture of a vision together and a purpose for the relationship. I think that's really huge because, I mean, you probably know better than I do working with more couples than I have, but it seems like most people just fall into it and don't really have a conscious intention of why they're doing what they're doing.
Not really. It's not what isn't conscious or what isn't actually determined through a back and forth is whether we're on the same page on anything. Take love, for instance. Well, we should love each other more. Well, do we know what that means and how we defined it? And your experience of being loved is going to be different than mine. I want my love differently than you. But rarely do people even talk about this. What do we want, and where are we the same, and where do we agree? That is a kind of social emotional intelligence that is required for consensus. You and I, two different people with two different histories, brains, nervous systems, and likes and dislikes at any moment is going to be different. And that is just the way it is. That's a feature, not a bug. But if you and I don't know how to create consensus, to find every time we're trying to get along and creating policies or principles Where we do agree first and where we are the same, then we'll fight. Because what we tend to do is look constantly at where we are different and where we disagree. And that's, fighting in the weeds.
Mhm.
So you and I want oranges, you want apples, and we fight over it. And it doesn't occur to either of us to ask the question, do we both want fruit? Because we would say yes. And then we work our way down. Okay, it can be, the other can be arranged. We both agree. We like fruit. Fine. If you don't like fruit and you only like vegetables, do we like food? So, I mean, people have been doing this, since the beginning of civilization to get groups to get along.
Mhm.
And yet, again, this is lost on couples because the expectations and our attitudes towards coupling and romance takes us into a whole different area where we're not looking the same way. That we have to agree or we'll fight. We have to come together and point in the same direction or we'll fight. We have to play it good for both of us or we'll fight. That's everybody. That's not unique.
Mhm.
So
You mentioned something earlier that I want to circle back to that I thought was very interesting. I want to remember if I can say it exactly how you said it, but essentially you said something along the lines of one of the things that's needed is to protect our partner from ourselves.
yeah.
Could you dive a little bit more into that and what you mean by that?
I think I'm a nice guy, but I know I can be a dick and I'm selfish and I'm self-centered and I'm impulsive and I like what I like. And it'd be so nice if I could get away with things. But that would not work in a two-person system. I would soon become a predator. I would be guilty of being unfair, insensitive. I would be guilty of caring about my interests only. And that means our relationship is going to last only so long because that has a trajectory that has to end badly because you're going to resent me. We'll just continue to see each other as adversaries, which is dumb because one of the reasons we unionize is to survive, is to protect each other from the environment. This is true of not all mammals, but many, certainly true of human primates. So you and I need each other to survive. I can't go screwing you and expect that we're going to make it. And you can't do that with me. So we have to have principles that we believe in that harness our, lesser angels that are human, and to put guardrails in to keep us from damaging each other or damaging the union. That takes a constant shaping and molding of us, the two of us, to create ways to prevent us from harming ourselves or the union. And that has to be all hands on, right? That's, again, two people governing with permission. You can't govern without agreement and permission to do so. And that's how we get along in the long run. That's how we get what we want. That's how we prevent bad things from happening. By previous agreement and permission to say, you can't do that. I can't. You must do that. I must, you must. We agreed. So do it.
Setting the agreements for that.
Yeah. It's a structure. It's an organization, and we have to build it, or it's kind of like flying a plane that's not finished being built. They're going to crash.
How do you invite people into that conversation? What does that look like? Or could you help paint that picture a little bit?
It's an amazing learning curve. Everything. An amazing learning curve. And I'm constantly learning, and so are the people around me. Teaching is a learning curve. But this business of orienting people in couples to think like a two-person system, which they would automatically if I were allowed to shackle them for a month. right?
Mm,
You know,
mm,
if I were allowed to bind their inner legs for a month without going to jail or being sued, they would understand everything about secure functioning, which is
mm,
basically a social or a series of social contracts that guarantee fairness and justice, equality, shared power, and so on. Uh,
mm,
right? They would understand it that they would not be able to move without the other's permission. They would not be able to do or go anywhere without working together. If they pulled apart, they'd feel pain. If they tried to move too fast, they would fall. And so that would be the best image
mm.
for what a two-person psychological system is of collaboration and cooperation. Still two separate people, but they're working together to get what they both want, or they get nothing. And that's the image of I have to take care of you and myself at the same time, or there'll be trouble. That's the image.
Yeah.
It's very simple. We know it from childhood: cooperation, collaboration. We know this. If our lives depend on it, we would have to work together or we'd perish.
Mm,
But couples don't see it as a necessity. That this is about survival and our lives depend on each other, working well together, or we don't produce, we don't survive, our health is compromised, our finances are compromised, everybody around us regrets being around us because we're just nasty to be with. So it's really about teamwork, and
mm.
that's a hard thing to reorient people, especially people coming in who have already accrued a lot of threat and a lot of injustice and just want justice. They don't
Yeah.
care about going forward. They just I want my justice.
That's definitely true. It takes a switching of the mindset
It does, yeah.
to go there.
Yes.
How could you initiate that conversation with your partner? Could you share an example of what that might look like to level out and get on that same page, to then be able to have the conversation to create the agreements in the first place?
So think of it this way, because I'm very clear on this.
Mhm.
Um, somebody who's right thinking in terms of the spirit of this idea will see the process as enjoyable, pleasurable. It's a creative process. It's like somebody puts a big blob of clay between you and I, and now we're going to shape it into something that we both find delightful.
Mhm.
And maybe we're continually shaping it throughout our lifespan. But it's ours. It's not our parents. It's not a book. It's not Oprah. It's not a religion. It's not anything other than tailored to our needs and wants in this time. That's an ongoing process, a creative process of dreaming and thinking and putting the bar higher and higher in this or that area.
Mhm.
So you and I are thinking, what's the best thing? What's the best life for us? What's the best way for us to be as partners? Right? Well, one is we'd like to make the relationship as easy as possible because nothing else in life is. We want to keep our interpersonal stress low because that's what kills people. Too much stress, in this case, interpersonal stress, should not be in our home, which is our relationship. How do we reduce interpersonal stress and stay vibrant, healthy, youthful, and resourced to be able to deal with the vicissitudes of life? Do we want to put our relationship at the top of the food chain? Our relationship, should it be the first and most important thing we think about when considering planning, organizing, and so on?
Mhm.
That doesn't mean we put our child in a closet with a bowl of kibble and jet off somewhere. It means that hierarchically, you and I have to be okay at all times. Otherwise, our kids, our family, our careers will not do well unless we're okay. So we have to put the relationship first, because everyone and everything is depending on us. That's a way of looking at it.
Mhm.
That's an imagining, right? That's made up.
Mhm.
And then if we agreed on that, then everything below that, principle-wise, would have to agree with it.
Mhm.
Well, we tell each other everything. Why? Why should we do that? What's so good about that? Well, one is we're in the foxhole together, so why wouldn't we want to be ourselves fully and to not have to work so hard to think about what we're going to say or not say? Why wouldn't I want to be known as well as I can know myself? That's one. Two, if we are a team and everyone is depending on us, the right and left hand have to know the same thing, or we can't do business. Everything will suffer. So there's a practical reason why we have to know the same things. We have to be informed. I have to read you in on everything. You decide if you don't want to know it, but I'm not the decider of what you should or should know, right? So free flow of information makes our life easier. It makes governance easier, and we can handle everybody and everything that would try to split us, because we know the same things. They can't split us. So that's a virtue and a principle that will keep us safe and keep us informed. So that works.
Mhm.
We have each other's backs in public and private. We're ardent defenders and supporters of each other. That means we don't throw each other under the bus, embarrass each other, expose each other. And if we do, we immediately apologize and do something to make it right, because that shouldn't happen. Why is that a good thing? Right. And so in the process of coming up with principles, which are really, what, our commandments, our Constitution, these are ideas of behavior toward each other that sets the bar higher than we ordinarily would, and makes our life better because they serve a purpose, right? The purpose is to keep everything running smoothly and not put us in danger in terms of transparency of one of us discovering something we feel we should have known, and that causes a big problem, right? So it's all practical, and it's done as policymakers. You and I are putting our policy hats on. We're not doing it when we're angry or upset. We're doing it calmly to plan for the next time or going forward. What do we want to do? So we're finding, by going back and forth, we're finding what is the best thing we could do in this area, or what would be the right thing to do in this area, even though it could be the hardest thing to do. That means it's purpose-centered, not based on how we feel. We have to do it. It has to be done. That's a good life.
And it definitely raises the standard, beyond the I, me construct and form.
It makes us grow up, and it involves the idea of character. The character is, we decided what the right thing is to do through collaboration. Cooperation and character is following through, even though we don't want to at the time.
Yeah, and that could be really powerful for the development of the individual, but also the relationship. You can really see that.
And again, this is what the kids see. Watch Dad and I do this. Watch Mom and I do this. We want you to do the same thing.
So when it comes to prevention from a child, somebody has a kid, would you say that that's one of the bigger things, is that it's they're seeing, it's a game of what they're seeing, not what they're being told?
Right. It's monkey see, monkey do. We expect you to be honest like we're honest with each other. We expect you to fall on your own sword when you did something wrong. Humility, admit you're wrong, make it right, go forward, all of these virtues that we all talk about, but here it's in place as our sort of our culture. This is our family culture, our ethos. This is how we do relationships. And of course, the parents have to be exemplars of this. They can't just say it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And what type of, I mean, you've talked a lot about the shift of coming into a two-person system. I think that's really important to highlight here, because it does require, if your relationship, somebody's relationship is rocky or it's not working, it requires that change of perspective in order to get on the same page, instead of like having somebody having their way. It's creating that collaborative dynamic that actually sets it up to win.
One thing that people can do immediately to prevent this psychobiological accumulation of threat memory, which is, in a way, you can think of it as inflammation, right? Inflammation in the cells, and inflammation here in terms of memory system and anticipatory thread, so that the way it accrues is that neither of us fixed things, repaired the situation, relieved each other in a timely fashion. Had we done that, we wouldn't have accrued or have this snowball effect of threat memory. And so that should start now. People should start to learn the art of falling on your own sword. I'm sorry, I screwed up. That was stupid. I wouldn't have liked it if you'd done it. No excuses. That's the first part. The second part is, let's do this the next time to make sure I don't do that again. Right. And so if I even come close because I'm an idiot and I'm automatic and I'm reflexive, I'll probably do it again. If I even come close or do that, I give you full permission to prompt me, remind me, cue me. And I promise, I pledge, I will yield and cooperate immediately without pushback. That seals the deal. That relieves everybody and sets everything back to a level playing field again. But most people don't do this, and so they suffer the consequence of memory. Had you and I repaired something immediately, we wouldn't remember it going forward. It wouldn't have enough time and intensity or adrenaline to form long-term memory. Right? But we took too long. And so now it's in long-term memory. So all of this can be reversed because the past is always present. We can't change the past, but we can change the present and the future, which actually does change the past. But we have to be forward-looking. We can't keep going looking back and litigating the past. That's going to keep us there for a long, long time.
So what are some tips and ways that people can actually do that repair process effectively?
First, to believe that it has to be done. Otherwise, your relationship is going by the way of the dodo. We invented repair for just that reason. So we didn't go to war. So we didn't get sued. So we didn't lose our family. We didn't lose our marriage. We didn't lose our life. And so it's an important social element of being civilized and getting along. So that should start now. And if people make that pledge a principle, let's say you and I say, okay, we've had a hard time doing this in the past. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about me, both of us. Let's put a principle in place that says that you and I, no matter what, have to make things right or relieve each other within 30 minutes. We have to do this, right? And if the other person isn't doing it, the other person has the right to say, or do it actually. Rather than my coming to you and saying, hey, it's been 30 minutes, you haven't done it. That would be thinking. It's my responsibility to do it. So, right. So it gets done. But then also talk about why do we want that? Kevin, why do you want that? Why would you want that for yourself? Convince me that you have a selfish reason for wanting that principle to exist. Because if you can't convince me, you're not going to do it when it comes time to paying out, right?
Mm.
And you should ask me the same question. Why,
Mhm.
Stan, do you want this for yourself?
Mhm.
And then we have to think, is there any downside to this principle, this idea?
Mhm.
And are there any bad downstream effects? And if there aren't any, nine's a winner. It's engraved now in stone. It's perfect, even though we're not. That is a principle we're going to live by, regardless of whether we feel like it or not. That means my pride, my stubbornness, my needing to be right takes a backseat to this principle.
Mhm.
And so it shall be done. That's the start of something. You just don't go, okay, sure, let's do that. Because you can be sure I won't do it. It has to
Right.
be done correctly. You have to you have to drink the Kool-Aid on these things. Otherwise, you're not going to do it when it comes time.
Mhm. And I'm really hearing you say, like, flesh out the details of it too. Like you said, instead of just like, yeah, let's do it. Like, okay, well, why? And what are all the effects of this? And what could be any negatives? Like, that's really what I was hearing you say, is like, stay in the conversation a little bit longer.
Yes,
Than the,
because you're determining what you're going to do when it's the hardest thing to do, and your
mm,
character is on the line here. So you better be sure that that you that you're saying yes to something you're expected to do,
mhm,
right? Otherwise, you're going to be accused of being in bad faith, and that's a greater problem.
mhm,
So most agreements are broken because of shoddy process. The agreement was not worth anything because people just didn't do it properly. So these agreements have to be done properly. They have to be challenged and vetted. And, are we sure we want this? Yes. So Tracy and I have, we can go to bed angry, but we have to at least touch toes. And that's a variation of the 30 minutes thing, because
mhm,
we don't have to apologize. We don't have to settle the matter. We just have to touch toes. And on a neurobiological level, that is all we need, because as soon as
mhm,
we touch, we return each other to safety immediately. Immediately. You
mhm.
have to do it to know what I'm talking about. It is a gesture, unequivocal gesture that says, I may be angry with you, but we're okay. We're okay.
Mhm.
I hate you, but we're okay.
Yeah.
And that's all we need to be able to sleep at night. That is all we need to be able to breathe during the day. Because when there's a breach between you and I on an attachment level, there's an existential threat.
Mhm,
And we're not going to do well until we get relief.
mhm.
And the sooner we get relief, the longer we live, actually.
One of the things that I've implemented pretty early on from reading your book in my relationship is the reunion hugs.
Yeah.
And that's been, like, I didn't realize how impactful that was until I actually started doing it. I was like, dang, like, this really is, it creates more sense of safety.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. It does, because in our world, again, we're primates, human primates. Separations and reunions have an effect on our nervous system and on our neuroendocrine system, whether we realize it or not. So
Mhm,
the way we separate, say goodbye, or launch each other in the morning, and the way we come back together and reunite is actually very, very important. And the manner in which we do it determines what happens next. So you and I have been away, and we come together, and the first thing I say when I see you is hi. My eyes light up, and I greet you with glad to see you, regardless of how bad my day is. As I can go, hi, God, I had a shitty day. It's so good to see you. Right? And we can talk about it. Because
mhm,
the very first thing you got was a definite um, glad to see you greeting,
mhm.
which primes both of us for what is going to follow the next thing, as opposed to what? Hi. I'm busy, or I'm in a bad mood. That's going to affect what's next as well. So in order for us to set the tone for what is going to happen next, we have to co-regulate each other's nervous systems, meaning we do what we're actually built to do. We're the only species that can do it. Go eye to eye and stay with each other until our eyes relax, or go belly to belly in an embrace and we hold each other till we feel the other person relax, and then we let go. That has an effect of co-regulating our autonomic nervous systems to a point where we're not so far away as to smack into each other, right? I'm in an excited state, you're in a very calm state, we're going to smack into each other in some way. The house is going to look worse, the kids are going to be too loud, everything is going to be irritating because we didn't reunite properly. It takes only seconds, actually. And so we're changing each other's state by balancing each other out simply by greeting properly. And that changes our perception in the immediate. We know that state alters perception immediately. So, hey, you know, as a science experiment, everybody should try this and A/B it and see if it's better. If it's not, then don't do it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it won't be better.
Definitely. I notice when I forget to do it.
Yeah. Me too.
I kind of like, yeah. And then you're like, oh yeah, that thing. What are some of your other tools that are like that you have found really valuable in your own life?
Oh, golly. Learning how to pay attention and to stay focused on my partner's eyes when we're under stress or in distress. To watch very closely my impact on the person I'm talking to, because it matters. Many of us don't look or keep our eyes on the ball when we're talking, as if we don't really care about our audience, and that puts us in jeopardy. So why should I look at you when I don't want to? Well, if I want to stay safe and I want to be available to what happens in the next moment, I better stay focused visually on you, because we're visual animals and we error correct through the visual field, not through the auditory or through the tactile field. We don't. So it's in my best interest to watch you like a hawk as I'm talking, to make sure I don't misstep, because if I do and I don't fix it, I've just lost my audience and now I'm just talking to the wall. Or worse, I'm going to get punched, metaphorically. So this idea of being, straight on and not to the side and not from another room or not texting or not in an email, but dealing with each other face to face, eye to eye, to get through difficult subjects, or even for excitement, even for just falling in love. We fall in love through the eyes. This is the best way to deal with each other, especially when we're not feeling good, right? When we're not okay. So that's one. The other is learning to lead with relief. You complain to me about something, and the first thing I do is relieve you. I don't explain myself. I don't defend myself. I don't say, well, what about what you did? I relieve you quickly. Why? Because it's tactically in my best interest to relieve you. Otherwise, I won't be able to influence you. You'll see me as a dangerous character. So I must do that. Otherwise, I won't have a collaborator. I won't have an audience. So I'm sorry I did that. Oh, boy, screw me. That was stupid. Or you're right. you know, but I am not going to be an adversary here. And this follows the idea of secure functioning, that you can be right or you can be in a relationship. That when the relationship is the most important thing, that is what we're protecting, not ourselves. That's again, all of these things are very hard to do because of our nature. Very hard to do. And so it's a practice, but it's a practice only if you believe that this is the best way to do business in a partnership. If you don't, then party on. But all of these things are very practical. They're not new. They're understood intuitively. They're common sense. But when we're upset, common sense goes out the window, and self-preservation is center stage at times.
Yeah.
So I can't expect you to stop stop preserving your own safety. I have to return you to safety, so you don't need to do that. It's my job. You're in my care. I'm in your care. Therefore, you have to know how to handle me in the best way without using a stick or a whip. And I have to be a master at you. Same way. There's nothing you, Kevin, could do that I won't know what to do without hurting you. I can handle you. And you can handle me. That's sublime.
Yeah.
But that takes practice and frustration and failure.
And time, trial and error, I'm sure. Yes.
But if I'm in the foxhole with you, I better know you.
Yeah.
Because my own survival's at stake.
What do you see as one of the biggest things that gets in the way of people doing this work?
Entitlement. I shouldn't have to do this. It should just be easy. I want you to do this, but I don't want to. Oh yeah, I'm unhappy. I'm so unhappy. I don't know why. Oh yeah, I know now. It's you. That's what all people do. We create personal narratives, and our personal narratives are always focused on our interests, never the other person's. So the more adversarial we become, the more we rely on a personal narrative that protects my interests, but you're screwed. I believe what I believe now, and you're not going to get out of this, because I will be fooled once, but never twice or three times. I can't adjust my narrative because I need to be safe. And so now we rigidify, and we are victims of our own pattern recognition. We shoot first and ask questions later. Now we're into another system that's hard to get out of. So I would say it's our pride, it's our entitlement, it's our forgetting that a couple is not family. Only blood is family. We're strangers, always trying to get to know each other. We can never fully do that, but we want to. And so the formalities of strangerness have to exist as they did when we first were courting. We can't drop them. That's violating. That's like, I'm in my family. I can do whatever I want, and you'll forgive me. It's your family. It's a mistake. Our pride, our desire to be dictators and to have everything our way, our desire to be solo players and not team. Is this a team sport, not a solo sport? Our excuses, my own trauma prevents me from playing fair. You're just going to have to cut me some slack. My drugs and alcohol cause a problem, so I can't show up. I don't. I was never a leader in my life. I'd like to be a passenger in this relationship, and rely on you, and then blame you for everything. I mean, these are all just human stuff, right? It's our humanity that gets in the way of relationships lasting a long time. We eventually do things automatically, reflexively, not necessarily purposely, but
Mhm.
based on our own memory, that is violating the other person.
Mhm.
So I'll say, well, that's your opinion, or I'm sorry you think that way, feel that way, right? I won't take ownership that I did that.
Mhm.
And so we have all sorts of ways of protecting our interests that are just unfriendly in a union, that are non-collaborative, non-cooperative, um, that will lead to the eventual end of the relationship. So again, we're talking about a system, an awareness, like being shackled together. I am dependent on you. You are dependent on me. We could go and have the shackle taken off by an expert, and then we can go our separate ways anytime we want. But while we're together, we're bound together, and we've got to move together, or we go nowhere, and we get nothing. That's the bottom line.
Mhm.
Very simple idea, very hard to implement in real time.
Yeah. I think though, even just being aware that that's the perspective you get to take on in order to have an effective and healthy relationship is huge in and of itself.
It's huge. And what we're forgetting here is that the reason to do it isn't simply to avoid a stick or trouble. It is an incredible experience to have a day-to-day life where love is earned and respect is earned by what we are willing to do when it's the hardest thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, that is hard to replace. That isn't the same as the kind of love most people talk about, which is a fanciful kind of, what the weather is like, feeling that sweeps over us. That's not reliable. Because what am I going to do when I don't like you? What am I going to do when I'm not that into you? When I'm sort of like, you're not that interesting to me right now. What am I going to do when I'm mad at you? Um, right? Love will not will out. It's not enough. And so I think the take home here is that people have to think seriously about what a real union is, an alliance is. It's not based on emotion. It's based on principles that we agree on, a purpose. Why are we doing this and not something else? And where are we going? Where do we want to be? We know that in any system, as we look at our own country right now, without a shared purpose and a shared vision, people fragment, they tribalize, and eventually there's civil war because there's no unifying, groovy idea that everyone would get on board with.
Mhm.
Take our mind off of our differences and go to where we agree and where we're the same. We want this. And that's lacking right now. You see what's happening. The very same thing happens in couples.
Yeah.
You and I don't have any projects we're working on, so we start working on each other,
Mm,
and that don't work.
no. Yeah, we all know how that feels. Not
Yeah.
fun. um, this has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. I know you have a new book coming out, right?
Yeah. I'm writing a revised version of Wired for Love. But I have finished a new book called In Each Other's Care, a guide to the most common relationship conflicts and how to work through them. I didn't write that one. Publishers write these subtitles, and they're
Oh, okay.
always long like this, but it's
Yeah.
in each other's care. This is the first time I've actually compiled. It's a big book.
Mhm.
Um, every chapter is by complaint.
Wow.
So I've taken all the complaints I've heard in my clinic and organized them in chapters so you can look up your particular complaint and how to analyze it in terms of secure functioning, by dialogue and by intent and by how you're going to work this out.
Wow. That could
Yeah,
be really beneficial and useful.
yeah, it was fun to write too.
I can imagine. What because I know you said you're always learning. What are you studying right now? or what's piquing your interest in the work?
I think the original question is how to best message this and to
Mhm.
convey this to different minds,
Mhm.
because we're talking about big ideas here.
Yeah.
Big ideas that everyone, I think, can agree with.
Mhm.
But it's only the big ideas that we share that allow us to point and go. So how to convey this idea of secure functioning to people who don't believe it exists, believe that they'll be screwed, even though it's a guarantee for no one being screwed. But for those of us who have had a lot of unfairness in our families of origin and always got the short end of the stick, we kind of wonder what's up with this. Was this real? Um, and especially with people who have already paved the way for a lot of injustice, and like I said, now want their justice. They don't want to go forward. They want to litigate the past, and it's very hard to get them to trust the idea that going forward is the way out.
Mm. Mhm.
Very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is being, I'm focusing more on that, how to teach it and how to sell it in my practice.
Yeah. It would definitely make sense given your level of mastery in the work. It's like, okay, how do we just spread this message to more people, get people to grasp it? Because
Yeah.
you have a grasp of the understanding of the work, obviously, and then it's
And
getting
I
other
also
people
have
to
to,
believe it.
and I have to do it, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not easy, but I'm a
Mhm.
happier person for it. I feel like a much better person for it. So, it's hard to do, but there is, if anybody can think of a way to ensure a long-lasting relationship of happiness, not just long-lasting relationship, but of happiness, tell me about it.
Mhm.
Because I can't see any other way that would work that won't be too unfair, too unjust, and too insensitive too much of the time.
Yeah.
So there is nothing else to do except practice this.
Well, like I said, this was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much for taking time
Oh, it's a
to have this
pleasure being with
conversation with
you,
me.
Kevin. Yeah.
Where can people find out more about your work and the new book coming out?
Um, just go to thepactinstitute.com, PACT
Mhm.
institute.com. That's where you can get information on couples retreats that Tracy and I do around the world.
Mhm.
And if you are a clinician of any kind, this is how it started. We train therapists, psychiatrists, anybody in the psychology medical field, this psychobiological approach to couple therapy, but also it really works also with families and groups and individuals. Uh,
Mhm.
and that's where you can also find out what we're doing and what's coming up.
Beautiful.
All right.
Well, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
It's, yeah, I like that I met you. You're a good guy.